give yourself the opportunity or even the mindset that quitting is an option, you're going to take that. And I think that's the same thing within business and within a race like this, which is over 24 hours. If you give yourself the mental out that quitting is an option, you're going to take it.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Incident Report presented by Quest Technology Management. I'm Paul Burke, Director of Technology Communications. Every week, I'm joined by VP of Sales and Partnerships, Adam Burke. The Incident Report brings you conversations with thought leaders, business innovators, and channel mavericks to help you stay productive and agile in a changing technology landscape. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Incident Report. This is episode 67. I'm half your host. My name is Paul Burke. Across from me, Adam Burke. How are you doing, Adam?
Good, Paul. Excited to be here. Pumped for today's episode. A little bit of a special event today, so I'm excited.
You usually just get Adam and I talking, but today we have a couple special guests. It's very exciting. We have Brandon Ivey and Patrick Oborn here. Guys, how are you doing today?
Fantastic.
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
We're really excited you guys are here today. Thanks for joining us. Some quick introductions. Brandon, you are with Evok. Can you tell the listener, what does Evok offer?
Yeah, so a little bit of background on Evok. We kicked off the organization about 4 years ago. My business partner and I, Christoph Ulig, we had quite a bit of exposure when we were with the direct organization, and then we saw the opportunity and became technology advisors. And over the last 4 years, I've gotten exposed to Telarus and Quest, and just been two of the key partnerships that we lean on a lot to do what we do well.
Love it. And speaking of Telarus, Patrick, you are with Telarus. Can you tell the listener a little bit about your role in the organization and what Telarus offers for the individual?
Absolutely, Paul. Really glad to be here. I'm Patrick Oborn, everybody. It's nice to meet you virtually. It's great to be here on the podcast. I'm a huge fan, first time caller, long time listener. We're a technology services distributor. So think of the people that really hold the contracts with the AT&Ts and the Verizons of the world. We carry on a support load. We carry on a quota. We put all those things on our back. So our partners like Brandon out there, we've got thousands of them that work with us across the planet, actually, every time zone. We support them with engineering advice. We support them with accounting help. We support them with marketing, just everything that they need to be successful, because Christoph and Brandon are exceptionally good at working with their clients and providing solutions. And everything really outside of that is where we kind of round things out and make it so that together we can go to market and give them everything they need to be successful.
And funny, you should mention teamwork, because the three of you, Adam, Patrick, Brandon, you guys recently worked on a big project called Leadville 100. Adam, could you speak a little bit about that for those who don't know about Leadville 100? As of 3 months ago, I had no idea what it was.
Yeah, so Brandon, let's go to the genesis of this story. How long have you been thinking about doing something like Leadville? I think you brought it up to us about maybe 8 months ago before the event. How'd you decide hey, I'm going to go for this? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I started doing ultras maybe 5 years ago. Started out with 50-mile races, essentially. And when I finished my first 50-mile race, I thought, well, I still have some gas in the tank. I didn't really have to push it as hard as I was expecting, which then leads me down a path of, well, maybe I can do something more difficult. I got exposure to Patrick when we partnered with Telarus about 3 years ago. And there's a lot of rumblings. Of course, there's not a lot of people out there that run 100-mile races. And so when I first met Patrick, I started kind of, an icebreaker was, trying to talk about 100-mile races. And I said, hey, I'm pretty interested in doing one. And we had some good conversation about that. From there, it just turned into, once you sign the contract, you get committed and you start to execute on the plan that you put in place. So I hired a coach, gave me an entry into the Leadville 100. And then I started pretty much going to, drafting my top players for my team, which were Patrick and Adam. And luckily, they both graciously accepted from the get-go. There wasn't a lot of him and Han or anything of that nature. They were both yeah, let's do this. And I was all right, cool. And then, of course, I have my wife, who's my crew chief and just executes flawlessly from the aid stations and things of that nature.
So ultramarathons are anything 50 miles in larger? Is that what an ultra is?
Anything over 26.2 is considered an ultra. But if you talk to guys in the wheelhouse, I think 100 is really the baseline at this point because there's guys out there doing 250-mile races and above. So
For some of us, anything over 2 miles is an ultra. So we're all different.
we all build into it. Hey, when I first started doing ultras, I ran like 3 miles and thought to myself, how am I going to run 50 miles? Everything's a progression, right?
And Patrick, you have a background in ultras, and I know you've done multiple 100s. I think when we first partnered with Telarus back in 2017, I saw you on LinkedIn, seen your posts, seen your crew events. Like you got into ultras after Ironmans. I know we did some talking on the trail out there with Brandon. That was your background, getting into ultras after kind of the Ironman engagements.
See, that's how you know Adam's a really good runner, is we could have these conversations in the middle of the night, completely exhausted, and he still remembers what we talked about. Yeah, I actually used to be a triathlete when we relocated our Telarus from Southern California to Salt Lake City. There's just a tremendous community of people that did outdoor stuff, triathlons and stuff like that. So I think I was here like 2 weeks before I got invited to come to a triathlon. It was a lot of fun. I was really terrible, and I just kept going. Ultimately, it led to Ironmans, and then I was like, I want to get really fast and qualify for Kona, but I know that I would never qualify for Kona if I couldn't get faster at running. Running was like my Achilles heel, and I couldn't get faster, so I started doing a lot more running, and then I kind of learned about ultras, and I'm like, well, that will surely get me better at running, right? So then when I come back to triathlon, running is going to be my forte, and then that just coming back to triathlon thing never happened. I just went out and just kept running, and it just was really, really fun. I've got mountains here in Utah, just literally my backyard, so out there every day, and it just kind of becomes part of your lifestyle. And I like skiing, I like being in the mountains, but man, I love running in the mountains. I love hearing the streams, I love seeing the waterfalls, I love seeing the wildlife rustle around out there, and it's just really, really fun. One thing that we didn't mention about Leadville, it's 100 miles, but not all 100-mile races are created equal. Leadville has two things in particular that your audience needs to know about. It's 100 miles. All 100 miles of it are above 10,000 feet elevation. So you start above 10,000, you finish above 10,000. And for the rest of us 100-mile runners, that's like insane to think about, because like the race I'm doing this weekend, the maximum height it ever gets is 10,000 feet, and that's like twice. His whole entire race is above that, right? Second thing is time cutoffs. There are rolling time cutoffs that if you don't make it by a certain time, you're eliminated from the race. And the time cuts for Leadville are extremely aggressive. In fact, you have only 30 hours to complete the entire thing. If you can't complete it in under 30 hours, you're disqualified. So it's very, very hard. All the races I do have a 36-hour time cut, and some of the harder races in Colorado have a 48-hour time cut. But 30-hour time cut's one of the most aggressive. The only one that's equally aggressive is Western States, which is the very first 100-mile race ever up in Northern California, out by the Sacramento area, Adam, where you guys are headquartered. So when Brandon picked Leadville, he was picking the hardest race with an elevation perspective, and he was also picking a very, very aggressive time cut. So he couldn't just train to run 100. He had to run 100 under 30 hours with tons and tons of mountains. So that was insane. When he first told me that I'm going to start running 100 miles, I wanted to do Leadville. I was like, oh boy, this is going to be interesting, but I believe you could do it, Brandon, because if anyone knows how to work hard and put a plan together, it's this guy.
Wait, so Brandon, why did you jump into Leadville? Did you like put all the runs on an Excel spreadsheet and said sort by hardest?
That was just all luck.
Okay.
How many episodes of David Goggins did you listen to before you signed on that dotted line when you went to Leadville? I mean, were you in a total Goggins moment there? Was that just you just angry and going for it, or that is?
So there's two things. One, Leadville's kind of a long-standing 100-mile race, so it's been around for 40 years. Coincidentally, I just turned 40, so I thought that was kind of nice. Secondarily to that, though, was there's a program called Boundless, and they have a coaching program, et cetera. And if you sign up for that program, you get a guaranteed entry. The difference between that and a lot of the other races is you have to go run all these different ultra marathons and get like points essentially, and then you can put your name in for a drawing. And so there's a lot of luck, and that lottery system is not easy to it's not easy to follow, nor is it easy to execute on, right? So for me, and being a bit pragmatic in my approach to things, it was best if I just had this timeline. I had 14 months of training camp for that race. I knew I had my entry, and I didn't have to worry about any of those variables, which allowed me to just put all my attention to that one day. And so that's really kind of what let it down. And then it's in my backyard. Both Patrick and Adam traveled farther than I did for that race. And so I'm indebted to these guys for sure.
Let's cut to the day of the race. So I think you got the part of the crew here, but I think we got to give a serious shout out to your wife, Daniela, as far as the crew and the organization and the way that was managed. I mean, dude, I've never seen anything like that ever before. When I got there, like you guys had, the truck was organized, the bags were squared away, the packs were rocking and ready to go. I mean, we're talking like it looks like a NASCAR, not even NASCAR, like Formula One style, like pit crew kind of situation that she coordinated there. So that was really fun to see. I don't know, Patrick, if you've ever seen anything like that before, but I sure as heck have not. That was really neat, that way that was all organized.
No, I have not seen that. I think it was really great that they actually had a couple of practice runs in other races where they got to kind of test their system, come up with the hypothesis, test it out, make adjustments. So this really wasn't their first rodeo, and that there's a lot of business implications, right? Creating a quick prototype, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, making changes. And by the time they got to Leadville, I mean, that system, like you said, Adam, they had it down pat. It was amazing.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Except for the toad. The toad socks were a little weird, but
I know. You know what though? I didn't lose any toenails. I didn't have any. I have one blister. I mean, they do work. They're goofy, and I would never wear them in public. But for an ultra, I'll put them on, especially since I don't have to change them.
That is one thing I was pretty impressed with. Your feet actually held up very, very well, considering how long you were on them for 30 hours straight. Those were rough trails, and your feet actually held up really well. Except for, I think, it looked like you had a moderate stress fracture at the end of the day there, but I don't think it ended up being a stress fracture, but it looked a little brutal, but it was good.
Yeah, it was a little swollen.
As we're kind of talking about this, we're talking about the whole idea of a massive accomplishment, huge goal being set. And one of the things that we talk about in the incident report is our channel, right? So I thought it was really cool. And I didn't really think about this until after the race because, Brandon, you're a friend I've known in the channel for years now. Patrick, we've worked with Telarus for a long time. But when you kind of look at the analogy of what happened that weekend, Patrick wrote an awesome synopsis of the race on LinkedIn and kind of us getting chased by the Reaper that we could jump into that story here in a minute. But I thought it was really cool because kind of like the same way our channel works and we see our partners be successful is people step out on their own and create their own business to be technology and trusted advisors to help their clients get from point A to point B. And so Brandon, as an agent, as an independent operator, selected a huge goal to go after. And very similar like in the channel where people want to build their own business, but they can't necessarily always do that on their own. And what was really cool was Brandon brought in one of the founders of a technology advisor and a technology service broker, Legacy Master Agent, right? He's been around for a long time, knows the ropes, knows the players, knows how to get from point A to point B, his experience, right? So Patrick's been one of the founders of Telarus for years. And then I got asked to be on the team as well as a supplier, right? So I've known Telarus for years. I've known Brandon for years, and Quest as a supplier, I got to come in and kind of help move the ball forward a little bit as part of the crew. So I just thought it was kind of a really cool kind of channel analogy as far as Brandon as the independent operator puts the marker on the ground and says, hey, I'm going to go do this thing, right? Same as like an agent. I'm going to go build my brand. And then part of that support that we came with was, hey, I'm grabbing someone who's done this before. Patrick's done multiple ultras and has a lot of experience. And I'm going to bring a supplier who can help me run to the night too. So I just thought it was a really cool analogy. I thought it was a really special day. Anyone who's seen those videos or any of the things that happened out there, it was really cool. So I just thought that was kind of a good showcase of teamwork, and then also just, hey, put the big goal out there, go do something really hard. But if you got some people backing you up and helping you get there, it can work better too.
Yeah, I would just layer onto that too is there is a level of trust, right? So getting exposure to you guys and building those relationships and then being able to lean on you, whether it's on the business side or the personal side, to go accomplish other big, hairy, audacious goals it's awesome, right? And it's only doable with the right teams and the right people and the right resources. And so again, like, you guys have both helped me in my professional life, but also now in my personal life. And, that's something pretty special, I think. I don't think you get a lot of that anywhere else besides in the channel.
Yeah, and at the end, Adam, I don't think I've ever felt this feeling of satisfaction greater than seeing Brandon accomplish his goal. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, like it was like watching a child be born. You're like, I didn't make this kid, but I'm so proud that he's here, and I'm so excited to see what he's gonna do. And when Brandon first came and said, hey, I want to run the Leadville 100, it was like, wow, because that's a hard 100 to do by just any measuring stick. But to have that be your first 100 experience, it was crazy. And so I was just glad I knew what it was going to take. I knew from my own experience, and seeing other people too, because I crew some other friends and stuff. And so just being able to leverage that experience to help Brandon achieve his goal was just, it was better probably than accomplishing something on our own. So that was really, really fun.
That was my favorite part I saw the video after the race, and I see Adam jumping up and down, Patrick super emotional, and like, I'm not a hugger. I gave Patrick like a big hug, and I don't know, like to me it was something really special. Like it was pretty interesting to see two very stoic individuals who are physically and mentally just savages actually have emotion at the end of running of 12 hours. Like that was, I don't know, it was a highlight for sure.
And Adam, just to give you just some context of like why I was so emotional, I've never seen anybody in my history ever get close to a time cut and survive it. Like it's 0-4. I don't even know how many people I've ever seen. And so to see Brandon push and push and push as hard as he could, and even with that effort, even with his Herculean double summit, Hope Pass, which is there kind of towards the end of the turnaround. Like even with everything that he had, he was still pushing the envelope, and I'm talking seconds. Like in some cases, 2 seconds before I've never seen anyone get that close and fight through it. And Brandon fought through not one, not two, not five cutoffs. I mean, he literally had 1 second left on the clock. He put a 3 up with a hand in his face, and he made the shot 5 times in a row. Like that's the kind of rare thing that Brandon was able to do. So I was just, I felt like I had a front row seat to witness history, because again, I don't know if that's ever been done. Brandon, you finished that race dead last, except dead last still gets you a belt buckle and a nice race medal, right? So you finished right before the cutoff, but there was literally dozens and dozens and dozens of people ahead of you that had more time in the bank than you did, that had a lot more, I don't know, comfort level. And you went past all those people, and all those people did not make it. And so to see the range of emotions, because every time we got to an aid station and we got through, I turned around and I watched people getting stopped. I watched people getting disqualified. It was crazy. So to see you get to the finish line, and especially the last couple miles, that we had to go pretty fast because we were starting to bleed time a little bit. And those miles turned out to be uphills. And to ask you, say, this is the last time, we got to ask you, we know you're empty. You got to find the reserve tank now. You got to find that tank that Goggins talks about, that most people's physical bodies won't let them touch. And you reached down and you touched that reserve tank, and you were able to get to that finish. And it was just one of the coolest things ever. I hope you write a book, Brandon, or there's a movie made about it, because it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And to see you put all of your effort into getting to a time cut, and then go through the cycle of just being wrecked, building back up, getting faster, making a time cut, getting wrecked again, building back up, making the time cut by seconds, getting wrecked again. Like it was incredible, man. And that takes incredible mental strength that you exhibited. And while you needed your crew, you needed us, and we were happy to be there, man, you were the one that had to dig in and find that mental strength to just tell your body, I'm going to do this, and I don't care what you say. And it was awe-inspiring.
It's pretty easy though. Once I picked you guys up at mile 62, a little bit before with Patrick picking me up on the upside of Hope Pass there to make that first cutoff. Following you guys though, there's no weakness. There was no like issues. You guys were very calculated on finding paces and where we needed to be and just executing on that. And that was easy. And then I left my ego at the door. Adam sent me a few apples, gave me some juice here and there. It was I don't know if I've ever been that vulnerable with a grown man in the middle of the night, but that's what happened. You can edit that out if you want, but I think it's
Stuff that happened on the trail stayed on the trail.
Hand feeding Brandon apples at 2 a.m. in the morning is definitely something I don't think I've ever done before. But yeah.
and he started getting a little aggressive with it after I made that. But I will say, even that little bit of effort, I cashed that check. At the end of that, I didn't have anything else. But then within 12 hours, I was like, man, I should have finished with more dignity. I could have done these things differently. I didn't, like you guys are talking and you're remembering the things that were said that night. The night miles were my favorite, to be honest with you, because I was just able to follow these guys and just stay on their heels. You talk about conversations that took place. I remember counting. I remember that funny comment there. I remember another comment that was like, hey, we're doing good, but you need to pick it up. There are little bits and pieces that I remember, but I don't, I was in another level of the exhaustion. I think that these guys, they weren't even tired, which made those last 38 miles a lot more easier for me. So
we were so excited when you made it, when we saw you and Patrick grabbed you on the downslope of Hout Pass and made it across that cut. What was that? Twin Lakes? It's called Twin Lakes, right?
Yep.
When you made it past the Twin Lakes cut and we got to kind of do the pit stop and get you going and get you out. That was a great feeling because we had you there. We were able to pace you from there on out. And then we could just start grinding. You made it that first 62 miles up and over Hope and then back to the team. And then I don't know about you, Patrick, but I felt like once we had Brandon with us, it was like, okay, we got him. He's rolling. He's got a good attitude. We'll make it through the night. And that was one of my favorite videos, Patrick. You posted it with your synopsis. Was the sun is breaking on the second day, and we're just counting. You're just doing the count up to 15 and the count down to 15 down that fire break road. That was awesome. And honestly, that was one of the most fun, rewarding experiences I've had in a long time. Just being a part of watching that happen, making those cutoffs, watching you make that, and just being a part of that adventure. I mean, that was truly a really, really cool experience. And I was almost bummed a little bit the next couple of days after the race because it was such an amazing thing to watch and be a part of. And you're like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be part of something like that again. That was really freaking cool. Patrick says write a book or something, but that really was at the end, I was jumping for joy because it was so cool to watch that. It was very, very, it was epic. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. And a lot of fun. Paul and I joked about it felt like I got invited to be a groomsman at someone's wedding, at a wedding to Pain, and that was a lot of fun to be part of. Couldn't thank you enough for letting me be part of that, Brandon. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And then I would just one of the things that with Patrick's mention of going up and going down and then barely making those cuts, it does translate into what we do when we're running our businesses or working, et cetera, because there's so many ups and downs but as long as you're still in the fight, if you don't quit, then good things will happen. And I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways was I redlined it for 15 hours, but I only was able to do that because you guys were there making it look easy. And then I saw that finished video too, where I was I thought I was really moving that last, couple hundred yards. That was the slowest I've ever seen anybody run. It was just demoralizing. But I was you're still in it. And that's, if you kind of keep that mental fortitude when you're starting your own business or working with your clients and you just grind and you do your best, then usually good things come from it.
For those of you who weren't there, the entire city of Leadville plus every other participant in that race were there because it's a huge tradition to cheer on the last finisher right before the 30-hour cut. So when they saw us maybe a couple of minutes out, and we only had a couple of minutes, it was 9:58 a.m. and it closes right at 10 a.m. The guy with the shotgun to close down the race, he was out there, his gun was loaded. They were ready to fire. The whole entire town is cheering, trying to get that last person across the finish line, including the two Leadville policemen that were in their cop cars yelling at Brandon through the PA system, "Hurry, Brandon, you just have a few more minutes, let's go." So it was a huge, huge thing. But one of the takeaways for me that kind of didn't even have anything to do with Brandon was the other runners. And when Brandon got to the halfway point, there was a mercy bus there that was there. The engine was running, and all you had to do was get in line to get on that bus, and the pain would stop. And Brandon saw people well ahead of him in the race, which means they had plenty of time to finish, queued up to get on that bus. And Brandon's like, I'm not getting on that bus. But a lot of people didn't have mental fortitude, or they just felt so bad in the moment that bus looked like a really appetizing option to just get on and call it good. Second thing is seeing other runners when we were running together who looked fine, who looked confident, who looked like everything was going well. And Adam and I doing our math, and the whole crew like trying to figure out where Brandon needs to be, it was different than their perception of reality. I don't know what happened there, but if you kind of are looking around in business and saying, oh, it's great, everyone's doing great, I'm doing great, like you can't focus on them. Because I told Brandon this a little later on in the night, I go, those people are the walking dead, they just don't know it. They're not going to make it. So let's not adjust our plan to kind of be with them. Let's do our plan. If they want to join us, that's great. But if they can't join us, like, don't pay any attention. I know they look great, but it's a false flag. Like we have to stick on our plan, or else things aren't going to work out for us. And so our ability to really put the horse blinders on and focus on your plan, Brandon, and not what everybody else was doing was one of the hugest things I think got us to the finish, in addition to your grit and your ability to dig deep. But our ability to focus on our unique, individualized plan for you, and that's what got us there. And those other people, honestly, they were a distraction, because again, to me, a lot of them looked like strong runners. A lot of them looked like they had a pacer, they had a plan. Don't know what their plan was, but some of them were running, walking. But ultimately, I love that we stayed on our plan, and it was a thing of beauty.
My dad's always said, run your own race. I knew I wasn't going to win it, but I was hoping to do better than last place. But I'll take last ass over the pass. I got an extra trophy.
60% didn't even finish though, right?
I think it was like 840, 850 runners and 300 and what was I, 360?
360. A lot of those people that did not finish are seasoned 100-mile runners. So you took a belt buckle from a lot of those seasoned vets, man. You should be really
good. Patrick, one of the things you mentioned in your synopsis, which I thought was really interesting, is that you said Brandon brought you guys on specifically because he knew that you would tell him what he needed to hear, not what he wanted to hear. Like, was that ever difficult to tell him the stuff he needed versus the stuff he wanted?
That was actually a very fine line. In fact, Brandon and I and Adam, we had dinner the night before. I had a nice little pan-seared steak. And we told Brandon, look, this is going to be a night of total brutal honesty, and you have to be okay with us, like, telling you stuff that might be hard to hear. And Brandon's like, that's what I want. That's what I want. He was unequivocal about his desire to know what he needed, truthful coaching and truthful feedback. So we said, okay, it's going to happen. Now, just in full disclosure, we didn't give Brandon all of the information. We gave him just the information he needed to know in that moment, because it's our job to stress about the finish line. It's his job to get to the next aid station, right? So we just needed to get to the next aid station. And meanwhile, we were calculating kind of the bigger picture, but in the moment, he just needed the truth about how to get to that next measuring stick or that next cutoff line. And if he could do that, we were just going to take it one at a time. But in the back of my mind, there was a couple of times I was terrified that we were not going to make it. And so I said, let's just run to that next fence, or let's just run for 20 seconds and rest for 20 seconds. I didn't tell him we're screwed right now, but there were a few cases that was the case. But he didn't need to know that we're in big trouble. All he needed to know is, what do I have to do right now? What's within my control to change? And running up to that next little post, like, he could do that. So that was really the main focus, is to keep him focused on goals that were attainable in the moment.
The only time I sensed any doubt was when your guys' watches were off at like mile 90 or something. Somebody was like, I've got 5.5, and you were like, I've got 4.9 or something. And I was like,
we figured it out.
There was never any doubt, and then it was like, okay, we got to go. And we usually had to kind of almost sprint in every checkpoint, it felt like. Except that after the night ones actually got executed pretty well. There was only a couple that we had to run in. There was that last one before the finish line we had to sprint in. And then, of course, we had to move for the finish line, too, which was a total surprise, because I don't remember running downhill for the first 4 miles of that race. But that was one.
Yeah, that would have been good to know. And so our calculations on that last part, because we're working it out in our head. We're like, okay, here we go. We got this going. We're good. We're 3 miles out. And then all of a sudden, gut punch you to the face. The last 3 miles is like, I don't know. I think it was uphill the entire time. for the last 3 miles, and we had done the math.
Total surprise.
Yeah, I was like, hey, Brandon, that would have been good to know. Like, could you mention that?
I don't remember. It was dark. There were people there.
Yeah.
But we made it.
We did.
A lot of things work themselves out. We had to push it and we had to grind and do that stuff, but the aid stations being super fast, with you guys Patrick being the nutrition scientist and just keeping everything on point with that. I felt like Adam was just on point every time with pace, and his pace was very, very consistent. Like, I could get behind him and he would just run exactly what we needed to do for the most part. Mm-hmm. And then every once in a while, like, Patrick would take the lead, but I felt like Adam was up front all the time, and then Patrick was behind being like, hey, you're slowing down, get on his heels type of thing, which is, because as the runner, I didn't really have to do a lot of thinking, which in the big scheme of things was really good after running for 16 hours and then we're still running for another 14 hours or whatever it was. It got to the point where, like you said, I just needed to be told what to do, and that's all the energy that I could really put towards thought processes.
And I love that you could trust them, that you knew what they were saying was exactly what you needed to hear versus maybe what you wanted.
I never got any exposure to doubt or failure or quitting or we might miss this and I heard other pacers and stuff out there, and I see that in business too, right? Like, you know, you're not going to be able to do this, or that's too big, or that's not worth your time on. You just have to kind of build your plan and then stick to it like you guys did, and that worked out really well.
Yeah, man, that was our job, just buffer you from that. So all you had to do was execute. And executing is a tough job, especially that late in a race. You don't need to worry about the minutia of business and everything else. Just take care of what you need to take care of. And then my last question here in the podcast, Mr. Adam Berg, I want to know when he's going to lace him up and start laying down some ultras here, because Adam was unbelievable. He did.
I already pre-registered for next year's Leadville.
It was definitely a lot of fun to be a part of the team, and it definitely did get the wheels turning on. This is pretty cool. I definitely want to throw my hat in the ring on something. Got to find a good one to kick off. So it was a lot of fun. But
let Brandon and I know if you need a crew, man. We're here for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. That's the crew to go with. I think that'd be a no-brainer. So
I wanted to ask too, is what was your guys' number one takeaway? And whether it translates to business or not, that's fine. But, I really did want to, what was like the most, not the finish, but was there a time during the 38 miles where you guys were running and you had a really cool experience or whatever your most favorable takeaway was?
Well, the finish was epic. We kind of went over that. That was high emotions. But I think, and we talked about it a little bit the day before. We talked about people who are going to quit or jump in that bus. And we kind of talked about it the night before the race. If you give yourself the opportunity or even the mindset that quitting is an option, you're going to take that, because it's such a hard thing to do. And I think that's the same thing within business and within a race like this, which is over 24 hours. If you give yourself the mental out that quitting is an option, you're going to take it. Which was when I watched you start, and when I talked to you before the race, and when we saw you, quitting wasn't an option. It wasn't an option before you started, which I think sometimes people will set themselves up, whether it's a challenging physical activity or a new endeavor. If you're going to give yourself I'm going to do my best, you're going to take the easy path. You're going to take that off ramp. And one of the things that I saw with you was that wasn't an option. And for our team collectively, it wasn't an option. Like, you were going to get that belt buckle, you were going to finish. And what was crazy about it was we rode the lightning, freaking missing the Reaper by seconds every time, but it didn't matter. You were going to finish. And I think that's what I took away from this race, which I think was really, really cool, as a reinforcement of something I've learned before, but it definitely reinforced that quitting's not an option. And that was really cool to see.
Yeah, and with that quitting is not an option mentality, it really allows your team to do great things for you. One of the things that sticks out most in my mind, Brandon, was your very first aid station. Mile 23. I hadn't even got a marathon yet, and you didn't look good. Like, your face was frustrated, your hip was hurting. You were behind schedule. You'd already given away 40-something minutes of your 2 hours that we even had planned as buffer time. So things weren't good in the very beginning. And the fact that quitting wasn't an option, it allowed us to say, all right, things aren't good right now, but what can we do? What kind of plan can create for you? What can happen to get you back on track? And when you showed up at the next aid station, which was roughly another 20 miles out, you look like a new person. And so there's just so many ups and downs where you're like, this sucks, I'm done, to I can do this. And then you went back to, it sucks, I'm done. And the fact that you recognize that, right? You knew that there would be highs and lows. But so when you hit a low, you didn't get too overly depressed about it. When you got a high, you didn't get too overly excited about it. You stayed that nice level pace. But the hard part about this race is you can decide that you don't want to quit, but if you go too slow, you're essentially quitting, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we talked about. We're like, if we can't find, even before that first cutoff, if we can't find 5 minutes, okay, you've essentially raised your hand and said, I'm out. So digging deep in the moment was your answer to I am not quitting. It wasn't just stop running. It was stop running and pick up the pace to a super uncomfortable level and laying it all out on the line just to make an intermediate cutoff. Because had you not done that, that was the equivalent of a white flag. And so you not only refused to quit, but you gave the effort when you had to give the effort, where your teammates, like when we were telling you, hey, you need a little more right now, you were able to respond because you had, like Adam said, that mentality, like it's not going to happen. I think a lot of people, when they ran that night, they lost track of the sense that if I don't get it to the next aid station in 4 more minutes, I'm essentially waving the white flag. It's over for me. They were just like, well, I tried really hard. Well, what happens? Like you didn't give yourself those mental exits or off ramps. Like that didn't exist. We said, look, if we can't run an X minute mile like right now, we're putting up the white flag, and we refuse to do that. And you refuse to do that, and you listened to us. And it was just a good thing that we had that the iPhones have calculators on them, because we did mad amounts of math that night. We didn't make any math errors. I mean, honestly, too, it just goes to show you when you really put your whole heart and soul into something. We got really lucky. I mean, let's be honest. Like everything that had to go right went right for us. Like if we had to stop for one more, blister, if we had to stop for one more anything, we're out. Like we didn't have any margin for error. But the fact that you had that mentality coming in, and every time we did the math and told you this is what we have to do, we didn't really know how to do it. Like, how do you get someone to run faster on the flats? Just run faster? That's not going to work. Like, we had to customize a plan in the moment to figure out what it was. But having that mentality to start allowed us to go down those different tracks of problem solving. So congrats on that. And again, putting everybody outside of our horse blinder so we could problem solve for you and just let them figure out their own issues and not have you go, well, that guy's going pretty good, and let's just go with that guy's pace. I mean, he looks pretty strong. We'll probably make it if we stay with him. Like, no, there's people out there that look successful, that look like they're doing all the right things. But at the end of the day, your friends at Quest and Telarus, like, we can see what your peers are doing. We know what they're doing right. We know what they're doing wrong. And we want to tell you, this is how you do it right. Even though it may not make sense in the moment, it's the same thing. We know that that's what's going to get you to the finish. And if you have that right attitude coming in, like you had, Brandon, and all other partners for that matter, you're going to get to the finish line. And we guarantee it's going to happen.
All right. One other question was favorite quotes. I've got a couple. Water's a crutch, maybe an all-time best quote ever made because it's just ridiculous. The death before DNF one was a good just mentality baseline. Like that's where we were living. I had read where you'll pass out before you die. So I just figured I'd pass out before I die at that point. I think the other one that I really liked was at mile 62 was when Patrick said, we'll get you back to normal. Because you guys did the whole NASCAR pit stop on that picnic table, and you were like, we'll get you back to normal. And I just remember being like, boy, I must look really good right now,
I remember the search and rescue representative, like as you went through, just sprinting your heart out against that 62-mile line. And then we just laid you out on a table, and you were just like the patient, and people were just working on you, and you're just laying there. And the search and rescue guy comes over and says, hey, not to ruin the huge accomplishment, but if you're not out of here in 5 minutes, you're still disqualified. I was like, man, cannot catch a break in here.
That was a bit of a wild one, that one.
We had to get you on your feet out of there, or else you would have been DNF like again and again and again. Yeah, one of my favorites is Brandon, your wife texts. She says, "Hurry the heck up." So don't let him quit. Be mean to him. Like, she was seriously like, if you thought we were a little mean to you, like, she, I think, wanted us to be a little meaner, because she really, really liked it.
It was a team win, man. That's for sure.
I think one of the coolest things is when your kids called at like mile 98 and said, "Daddy, are you going to finish?" And you're just like, you're dying. You just looked at that phone and you're just like, "Yes, I'll be there in a few minutes."
I think when I heard from you, death before DNF, I've heard some angry slogans in the past, but that was pretty solid. Appropriately aggressive, I think. It was good. And the water as a crutch, just a little context on that. That was from a training run where Brandon came down to Arizona, and I think I showed up for an hour and a half run, and
we did 18 miles.
Yeah, I think we did 18 miles. But yeah, I had a handheld, but it wasn't much water. Never good to go running in the desert without water. But if you have the mindset of water's a crutch, you'll be fine.
Somebody had asked, why did I choose Patrick and Adam? Two things. One, we got some exposure to each other through a bunch of those great Telarus runs and Telarus events and just doing all of that. And it's pretty obvious that they're both very, very athletic individuals. But they've also done both really, really hard things in their past. So the fact that Patrick's done, how many hundreds have you done? 20, 30 of them?
Maybe 12 in 3 days.
Your 12th in 3 days. And then I knew Patrick had special forces in his background and has done a bunch of things in over 24-hour periods. And just between the two personalities, with Adam, I think, was going to be a little bit more dry humor. Patrick was going to be like super positive and super go get 'em. And it was easy to feed off of those two things. And so that's why I chose you two guys. And, and plus, nobody else wants to go run for 12 hours in the middle of the night. It takes a special individual. So again, I owe you guys big time.
It was a ton of fun, man. And again, thanks for including me. That was a blast.
That was great. And every time I talk to you on Zoom and I see that mountain in the background, it's going to carry a whole new meaning for me now, because we bonded on that mountain, man, and we made it over. We made it back.
Oh yeah, we did. You guys are dear friends, man.
It sounds like an incredible experience, guys. And thanks for coming by, sharing, and finding those business connections in an ultra marathon. Brandon, if people want to connect with you, how can they find you? How can they reach out?
Feel free to check me out on LinkedIn or just hit me up directly at brandon@evoktechnologies.com.
Sounds good. And Patrick, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
You can at me at Twitter at Patrick Oborn. Also, same handle on LinkedIn /Patrick Oborn. Just drop me a DM. I answer my DMs pretty frequently, and yeah, love to chat.
Guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us today, sharing everything, and hope you have an amazing week. Everybody listening, thank you for being here. And Adam, we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, guys, for joining. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening. The Incident Report is brought to you by Quest Technology Management. With over 40 years of experience, Quest is a leading technology integrator working seamlessly with your staff and systems to achieve your IT goals. Learn more about everything they do at questsys.com. And if you have questions or suggestions for the podcast, you can always email Adam and myself at theinциdentreport@questsys.com. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.